Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror Hangout episode where we plan practically nothing and we watch movies that are slightly more offbeat than our mainline films. And this week we are talking about the 1957 film that came out the same weekend as I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. Same weekend as I Was a Teenage Frankenstein and came out the same month that they began filming over in England what we call Horror of Dracula, or Dracula, with Christopher Lee. Isn't that remarkable? The very month that Blood of Dracula came out, Christopher Lee started walking around in that cape over in the UK. Anyway,
and a movie with much more Dracula in it.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So, to discuss Blood of Dracula, we have, as usual, Tony Salvaggio, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars, lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire, of Rooster Teeth. Welcome, Tony.
Howdy.
And, of course, from Austin, the creator of the long-running comic Halloween Man, which is available on Comixology, winner of awards and general man about town. Hello, Mr. Drew Edwards. Say hi.
I think we're gonna have to work on. I'm starting to get the sense that the new intro I wrote is a bit of a mouthful, and we might have to refine that.
Well, there's that, but I'm also working off of memory because I don't have a script.
It is a hangout. It is a hangout episode. You are allowed.
Yes,
you are allowed.
I have no
buyer
script,
beware.
This is Castle of Off Brand tonight.
Yes.
I mean, it's fitting for Blood of Dracula because there's almost no Dracula. So,
oh my goodness gracious! You know. I have been wanting to discuss this movie ever since we watched I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, and ever since which had Whit Bissell in it, and I Was a Teenage Werewolf, which I think also had Whit Bissell. And, you know, I was like, we need to watch the movie that is just like those movies, but is an almost all female cast. It's exciting to me that we have arrived at that evening. So I don't know. Opening thoughts. Yeah,
Jason,
Tony, go ahead.
Do you watch What We Do in the Shadows?
I have not watched the TV series.
Oh, Jason.
So I was just picturing like this series, like the monster series being very popular. And then there's like a low rent, unpopular series like I Was a Teenage Accountant.
Yes.
I Was a Teenage Plumber.
Well, I mean, to be honest, that was a joke. I mean, Mad Magazine used to do that gag all the time. That literally became a running joke. In fact, they still do it. You know, these movies were so incredibly popular that the I Was a Teenage, that became like a gag that, you know, Johnny Carson, you know, would just really break up a room with. And it's super weird that this movie is not called I Was a Teenage Vampire. I have zero explanation for that.
Maybe that was like maybe somebody had the rights to that or something.
I cannot, not that I'm aware. I mean, yeah, it's very possible. Maybe they were gonna and they didn't. But I mean, it is just very strange that given that this is essentially identical to I Was a Teenage Werewolf, why is it not called that?
Teenage Blob.
Yeah.
Womp womp.
Yeah. So, opening thoughts, Tony.
Yeah. I mean, I like this movie. No, I want to say I have seen parts of it because it seemed familiar, but it would have been like a late night or a monster movie theater kind of thing where I saw parts of it. But I do find it hilarious that we're now kind of two boarding school movies back to back.
Yes.
Both of them sort of tangential. As little Satan as there was, while this has more vampire, it has no true Dracula other than the amulet that's kind of
yes.
So we're two movies in where there's both a boarding school and a kind of sleight of hand in title. You know, I enjoy this movie, and I also think that this era of just here's what we're gonna do, and it has to hit these beats, right? So you have to have the pop song,
yes,
and there's girls, and there's monsters. In this one, there's a really terrible scientist / the worst psychologist, sort of like Drew,
chemistry professor.
Chemistry professor / hypno
whatever the heck she is,
therapist. Yeah. I mean, if you want to talk about somebody who's really worse than the therapist in Split, this woman.
Like, oh my god,
like, she's really doing bad things to people's minds to the point. And even though, you know, just because we kind of talked about this and we were talking about it online, but just because even though that's flawed, she knows full well that she's going to release something that's bigger than the atomic bomb. Oh, that's the other thing. It has to also mention atomic energy and atomic weapons.
A lot.
So evidently a vampire is immeasurably more powerful than an atomic bomb.
Yes.
According to our crazy hypnotherapist chemistry professor.
I love that when things start going wrong and her poor patient is like, I have this terrible feeling I was, that I did violent things or whatever. And she's like, well, she says all kinds of weird dissembling stuff, including, well, don't think about that. And it's for the greater good and leave that to me. And just
Right.
weird, it's the only thing she never does is like guilting. She's never like, if you betray me, I'll turn you in. Never. It's more like
she's just like, how? But what if we had more murder?
Right.
Because her thesis, we should get into that in a little.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I like this movie. It's fun. It was fun to do. It's crazy. I also like when at the beginning, she almost wrecks the car and then immediately just pulls out a smoke. Like, that was stressful.
Yes, right. And she starts to smoke, and the dad says, "You shouldn't be smoking at your age." And the stepmom's like, "I give her a pack if it'll make her behave better."
Right. No,
that stepmom was awesome.
Yeah. Well, the dad also is like, well, you might as well smoke it now that you've got it out.
Yes.
It can't hurt you more.
Oh, my
whoa,
God.
we have the 50s are not now.
Man, the 50s. Drew, your thoughts on, because I know that you're a big 50s dude. So you're more of a 40s dude, but still big 50s.
No, I like 50s, stuff too. It's amazing, honestly, that I haven't seen this before. I know that you've been wanting us to do it for a while, and it's been talked about. It's been talked about so much that I feel like I've seen it.
Yes.
It has a lot of things that I love. Vampires. Like girls in like striking kind of pinup-y clothing, in pinup poses in like vintage clothing. Weird science. It's got a certain 1950s sleaze to it.
Yes.
Which is a very specific flavor of sleaze.
Yes.
It's not the same as 70s sleaze.
No, you're right. You're right.
It's actually typified. We just mentioned the stepmother. It's typified by, even though she doesn't have the most screen time, it's typified by the stepmother in this movie. I really liked this movie, actually. I thought this movie was better than I Was a Teenage Werewolf and I Was a Teenage Frankenstein in some ways. I think the only thing that made me knock it down a little bit is I think if the script had just gotten one revision more, we would have gone from a movie that's pretty good to a movie that might have just been just below great. Like I really thought this was a cool movie. I thought the villain, even though she's awful, like her motivation of being a female scientist that's ignored by male scientists, that's kind of ahead of its time in terms of a motivation. I really like the look of the quote unquote Dracula.
Don't you want like how those like Mego has?
Or a Funko Pop or something.
I want the whatever she's called, the vampire person.
This movie should. You were right. This movie should be called I Was a Teenage Vampire, because that's what it is.
Yes.
And I like I like all the characters. I feel like we were talking about the comparison of this to Satan's School for Girls. I like all the teenage, again, they're people that are obviously in their 20s playing teenagers, but yes. I like the teenage characters in this. Like I liked the girl gang that kind of runs the school. I think they're interesting. Like the school itself is just presented in such a more thorough way that I was very drawn into this movie. It's short, so you don't get much of anything. Again, one other thing that I wish that they had, I wish they hadn't spent so much time on the cops. We can get more in on that later.
Right.
But overall, I really liked this movie. Like I think it'll end up in my regular rotation now that I've seen it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Let me just point out I spoke too soon. There is a doll. There is an action figure. I don't know how old it is or how for sale it is, but there is, and she has a red skirt and she has a scarf, and the scarf is yellow, which is a surprise to me because I kind of pictured that. I've only ever seen that scarf be white, but there is a Blood of Dracula doll, and I'm super stoked by the fact that exists. That they have somebody has it posed with a Barbara from Night of the Living Dead and with Mrs. Robinson from Lost in Space. So anyway, okay, so for me, I really love this. It's kind of everything that I want in a monster movie. That's kind of I don't know. It's played so straight. That's one thing I really love about these teen horrors of the 50s is that there's no campiness to it. It's just I think if you had made this in the 70s, there's a good chance you would have had a lot of really dumb like puns and slapstick. This is played straight.
And
yeah.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah.
With the dance numbers and the crooning.
Right.
That's
okay.
Also played straight. I mean, it's by the book.
Right.
So
you have
to have
we should
these
talk about
things
that
to get kids into the drive-ins or the theaters. But
yeah, it's like this is the music break. There's and that goes on for a while. Like there's a point in Ski Party with Frankie Avalon and Dwayne Hickman where they leave for a ski trip, and all of a sudden Leslie Gore just is on the bus with them and just sings a song, Sunshine, Lollipops, and Rainbows. In fact, she just sings. I think it might be the only song in the movie. No, there's one more because James Brown shows up. He just shows up. Literally, he's just at the hotel and does a number. But this is just the way movies used to be. Like at least aimed at teenagers, is they just take a music break and there'd be diegetic music for reasons that nobody can explain. Anyway. Yes, we open with Nancy, who is a teenager who is being driven to her new girls' school because her mom's dead and her dad has remarried, and they're going off on their honeymoon in France or wherever the heck they're going. And so they're taking their troubled daughter to a school for girls. And yes,
I love how much this movie judges the dad for remarrying. Like that's such a 1950s like, oh my God, it's terrible. You should have just stayed single forever. How could you? Like the daughter is like railing on him like in movie. But like they make him seem like, oh, he's just this like sex maniac, and of course like the stepmom is got like opera gloves on and a fur coat and like the
pearls.
The tightest dress in the entire movie, which is all like coded for she's a little too sexual, so that's why he just had to marry her. It's judging both of them super hardcore.
Well, also, how can she turn out any other way than to become a vampire when you have that kind of home situation?
Yes.
Right.
Well, no, well
like
said.
That's what it's saying. Look at how broken her home is. How can any child live in that and not get duped into becoming a force more powerful than nuclear weapons that turns into a vampire and sucks the blood of fellow students? How can she not?
I mean, and what proves that the movie has the attitude that you're talking about, Tony. And by the way, I don't know if the producers have this attitude. I think the producers are just doing exploitation, and they're like, "This is what the audience is going to enjoy hearing."
Yeah, I don't think that there was that much thought into it at all, except that was sort of the social mores of the time, and you
don't get remarried after 6 weeks. I just don't. Yeah, exactly. That's
probably don't get married. I think I guarantee you, like in a lot of the audience members, is like you just don't get remarried at all. You know,
Right.
like that's the underlying message there, because
and,
you know,
and then there's a subsection of men who are like, you do if it's burying that, right? I mean, right? All of the bad dads.
Yes.
He totally is a bad dad. Like they portray him as like both of them are super cartoonish, but I love them for like the little bit that they're in. Like even like all the like oh, you know, or, you know, the far, you know, like, oh, will you be able to make the drive back? Oh, they'll probably stop in a motel.
Yeah.
You
What
know?
was that line supposed? Am I missing something? Was she just saying I'm resentful that my father is sleeping with this woman, or
Yeah,
I have no idea what she was saying.
Sleep anywhere. Like they're totally gonna get it on right after they drop me off. Is what she's saying.
So they don't like they're grossed out by the sexuality of the
They're
parents.
sex maniacs, man. You know, like you can't be.
No, you're right.
Like you can't be too into sex. It's gonna
You're
turn you into
just unbecoming. Yeah. Well, I mean, so we'll get into that. That Julia and I were taking this whole movie as being coded for like all kinds of like, you know, just pervy girl school kind of stuff. If this were a Spanish film of like 15 years later, it would be a different movie. But there's and you would still have you would still have more vampires in it than this 68-minute film does. But they do have
vampires and less clothes.
Yes. I mean, just imagine if Jess Franco had made this movie.
But just about the same amount of hypnosis.
Oh, yes. The hypnosis quotient. Same or maybe more. And
Mark
also
Damon would
just
come
as
in
bungling. The cops just as bungling, actually.
Oh, yes. But they'd be Italian cops. So they'd be like, you know, chain smoking and
right.
Yeah.
I really did not like the cop subplot, because this movie, it wouldn't have bothered me if this movie was about 20 minutes longer.
Yes.
Because like I feel like the cops took me away from the characters that I were actually interested in, which was the kids.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
These cops were other than the cop that was like talking, because apparently everybody in the universe of this movie has some sort of ties to Transylvania.
It's like Marvel Comics. Like you can't have Dr. Doom if he doesn't know Reed Richards. He's like, oh yeah, you know, I once stayed in the mountains and I had a roommate who was totally obsessed with Draculas.
Yes.
How did you end up here? What college was that? Like,
yes.
And the other woman's like, you know, when I was doing some studies in the Carpathian Mountains, I totally didn't know that cop though. Let me tell you, I got this magic amulet.
One thing I really like. So, by the way, they do have one more guy who is one of the detectives who comes in and he gives a whole speech about how places like this School for Girls, he says, you know, people are going to want to close it down because there's violence happening. But he essentially says, I blame the parents for places like this even existing, meaning he doesn't think that there should be schools for girls. He really thinks that there's just something fundamentally wrong with all of these girls being here because their parents have sent them here, and parents should keep kids. It's a long speech too. I mean, it's like it considering this movie is only 68 minutes long, they devote a lot of time to this guy essentially preaching that it is not appropriate to send your girls away.
Well, I mean, how are you going to have a nuclear family?
Right. If this is an option,
sending them away to Dracula school.
Well, and so what's funny is, though, probably despite themselves, and let's talk. So Nancy gets there and she meets all the girls. And here's what's wild to me is that, yes, the movie is an exploitation piece, but actually because it has chosen to set itself at a school for girls, and unlike Satan's School for Girls, there are no men's staff here, except apparently a janitor that we never see. Consequently, all the parts are played by women, and so the women have more time to become, you know, very diverse characters, which you would not have if it were like, how many female characters are there in I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and could you tell them apart?
Well, in this one, there is the one guy, and that's the plot point, right? He's the guy that everybody shares,
right?
Because he does handyman work, and he's straight out of he's a very kind of Dobie Gillis type of character.
Totally
fits in the Dobie. Like he would be a character who you would see in that show, and the whole idea is he's that geeky guy, and they even say it like, well, I mean, if there were other guys around, you probably wouldn't be interested, but there's not. So We just passed him around.
He does have like this sort of slightly better looking Maynard G. Krebs vibe. It's funny that you mentioned that.
Exactly.
Like I didn't think about Dobie Gillis until you just said this, but this is totally like if a episode of Dobie Gillis went really off the rails. Like it kind of has the same look as Dobie Gillis.
It does. Yes, it does.
Which I enjoy. Man, like so much to like in this movie.
So let's start with the girls. Nancy gets at first she has a room to herself. She's gonna wind up sleeping in the dorm with like all the other girls in one big room. But at first night she gets there late. She gets a room to herself. But all the other girls come in and immediately start going through all of her bags and introducing themselves. And these are, the funny thing is, for ostensibly kind of juvenile delinquent girls, as the movie goes on, they're actually all pretty sweet and relatively well behaved. I mean, they're basically, no, I mean, seriously, like when Nancy seems to be not feeling very well, the boss girl is like, oh, well, why don't you go lay down?
Only after they mean girls her that night and then haze her. And then, this.
Also, they offer her up as a concubine to the janitor.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's a favor.
I guess he's a groundskeeper, but still.
Yeah. I don't know if they're sweet. Like, that's a stretch, man.
I thought they were fairly sweet. I mean,
that's like when you're after you've been hazed and all of your frat boy friends are also frat, like
that's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, look, we took Chet home rather than let him get run over by a streetcar.
Yes.
But you're still all terrible.
Okay, like, I'll accept that. That's I
just think it's funny that you read that as that.
Well, my point is, yes, we could even go so far as to say that it's inconsistent because yes, when we first meet them, they are totally mean. It might be that the writers just simply immediately ran out of things for mean girls to do at an isolated place where there's nothing to do. I mean, there's not really any trouble for them to get into unless one of them is a really creative psychopath, and none of them are that. And so they're all they haze her the first night. Hey, Tony, check this out. This scene, we've seen this before because in yet another, I'm such a perv, I keep picking like girls' school movies for us to watch. You and I did.
What are you doing, Jason?
I'm just saying, we watched When the Screaming Stops, and it also had exactly the same thing where the girl comes in, she's got her suitcase, and once the adults are gone, the quote-unquote adults, I mean, everybody's like nearly 30 years old, they all come in and they start giggling and unpacking her suitcase and going through her stuff. Passing around the cigarettes, the whole thing. Literally the same scene. And it makes me wonder if the people who made When the Screaming Stops, like basically lifted that scene from this movie. I really don't know.
You're also forgetting that even the girl who seems like she's going to be the usual timid, hey, I can't really say anything, but I'll kind of fill you in. Once she catches just the slightest bit of guff, goes, you know what? We're going to make it hard for you if you don't do this thing.
Right.
So, she's threatening. Yeah, it's just funny to me. I mean, I agree with you. It's inconsistent, but it's funny to me that that's the thing is all of that's normalized.
Yes.
Once you're in the inner sanctum.
Yes. No, that's true.
The sanctum is full of terrible people. But I mean, relatively speaking, right? Like these are.
I just want to point out House That Screamed. I'm so sorry. It wasn't When the Screaming Stops. It was The House That Screamed.
Right.
1969. Anyway, continue. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they're not all psychopaths.
No.
But they're not as sweet.
Well, no, I mean, they've got a pecking order, and they're gonna follow that pecking order. It's what is the name of the boss girl? Because the characters we meet super fast are, Nancy is the girl. There's the principal, Mrs. Thorndike, who's sort of sweet. I kept expecting her to become super mean, but she doesn't, And then there's the chemistry teacher, Mrs. Branding, who's the one that we need to be super worried about. And then there's the woman who sort of haunts the halls that they're more afraid of. And I can't remember that character's name right now. But I can't remember. There's the house mother, basically, is what she's called, and she's
also one of the girls who gets killed eventually. But
which one? Sorry,
Nola.
Yes. Yeah. But I'm sorry, I'm looking because I'm just trying to remember the name of the girl who is basically the I'm gonna cut this out later, but where is Myra, their leader? Myra is the leader.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, basically I keep calling her the ringleader, Myra, who for some reason is in charge of all the girls and is the one who you're right, she's not above disciplining. She also is in charge of sort of parceling out the boys. But yeah, after that first night of so-called hazing, after that they're all pretty good. They're not like there's not much going on because let's see what happens. They do have a party where some boys
with an impromptu dance number that seems very well choreographed.
Right.
Yeah, this is that music break, right? And it's, you know what, we were calling it pop earlier, but it's a rock and roll song. It's just extremely soft. It's just very, 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 very super soft.
It's like subpar. It's like subpar Dion is what it is. It's like,
oh my gosh!
Luckily, our
yeah.
man Tab can sing though, right?
What's
hey,
that?
Tab. Luckily, our man Tab can sing. Hey, Tab, show him how you can sing.
Oh my god!
Here's the karaoke record that we bring to places.
But think that's just like Gila Monster. Giant Gila Monster has a scene like this where they just have a music break. Teenage Strangler, which is like 5 or 6 years later, has a music break like this. It just happens in these movies, and it's movies that are not musicals. They just have Yeah.
I do love Nancy's constant, I've got no time for your crap, like dialogue. And the way she turns him down and everything. Like all of that stuff is really good. Oh,
she's very consistent. I mean, I like her a lot. She's always consistent. Yeah.
What are you, some kind of my dad?
So Myra is the helper to Mrs. Branding, and did I get that name right? I think it is. Yes, Branding.
And that's really
which is such
kind
a
of
made-up
a
name.
sad thing because other than the fact she's a supervillain, Mrs. Branding is definitely trying to take charge. She's had enough of men just wanting to blow up the world.
Yes.
She's basically going, well, women can blow up the world too, but in a way more but we'll show men.
Okay, what is her a fashion that's slower, because instead of using an atom bomb, I'm going to turn people into vampires.
Yes, thank you I was going to ask you to explain, since you know weird science better than the rest of us. What is her plan?
Her plan appears to be that she is worried about warfare. So that's the thing is this character would actually be a really complex character if her plan actually made sense. She's concerned that the atom bomb is going to destroy the world, which all 50s horror movies must be obsessed with the atom bomb. So she wants to come up with something that is equally destructive,
yes,
but not, I guess, as large scale. So vampires.
No,
I think it's going to distract everybody from the atom bomb by being worse.
No. Yeah. So she's concerned not just atom bomb, but the fact that fallout, radiation, everything atomic mutates people. Now, she doesn't have any problem mutating somebody into a Dracula. So there's already some weird complexity there. But also the power inside a human is so untapped and so much more terrifying than an atomic bomb. That if everybody knew they had that in them, they would tamp that down and everyone would be nice to each other, because everyone can be basically an atomic bomb.
Yeah, thank you. I think you articulated that pretty well, and honestly better than she does.
She pretty much lays it out, but
she really makes speeches though all the time. Like, someday when man is a lizard that crawls with teeth and the sun is a husk, and all, like like she's always waxing poetic about how awful the world is going to be, and she needs to make vampires out of people in order to save them.
See, if you wanted to streamline this, I think again, if this was a little bit longer, what you could have is that her plan is that she thinks that vampires are like when there's a nuclear winter, and vampires are going to be the only thing that can survive in this new atomic fallout. Like that makes it's still crazy.
That's so much better. Jesus, Drew. That's a million
welcome.
times better. That's a million times better.
I do think that when they were as goofy as it is and as convoluted as it is, I still think that they were really onto something with the difference between men solving a problem with a hammer all the time. And as a woman, she's tired of that approach and has taken a more overall approach, right? Like men would create a technology that kills and maims, and her approach is this: if everyone, it's an arms race that can happen all over the world. Because again, the arms race that she's talking about is if everybody can do this and they do, the world's over. But I'm going to trust humans to not, once I show them this, I'm going to trust them to not do this because they know that it's mutually assured destruction, because it's every human. And every human will drive this, as opposed to a few people with, say, nuclear codes or a few people with missiles.
Okay.
So you're going to take the power away from all of the powerful men, and you're going to put the power back into the people.
You're going to distribute.
You might also code for, I mean, at that point, you could code for communism too, which I don't think this really does, but who knows what they were, thinking about when they were writing it. We may be thinking about it more than they did.
I think that sometimes they really do seem to be, honestly, they sometimes seem to be just making up some lines. How they're really just like, hey, Professor Branding, I need you to just riff for like about a page and a half on, how you're going to save the world from becoming an atomic husk,
But in addition to all of the, again, what I like, you could look at this movie and say it's cheesy or campy or whatever, but also, there's some real meat to there is the one girl who's been her prize student and scientific confidant as well.
Yes. So that's Myra, who again is the boss of the girl gang. That's what's wild.
That relationship right there, I wish, is another reason why I wish the cop subplot didn't take so much time, because I would have loved to have seen more of the two of them together.
Yes.
Well, because she kind of thinks she's going to be basically, she's not even like a henchman. She's like she's the sidekick once this woman becomes a supervillain, or, she doesn't see herself as a supervillain, but we've all.
She's so subtly cutting where, Myra's like, I wish that I could do more to help you, in all the important, because she really is bought in to Professor Branding is going to say, wish I could do more to help you. And Myra's like, and Professor Branding's like, yes, but you won't do. I need somebody who has something that you don't have. It's like this. It's really cutting,
Well, it's heartbreaking in that way, because at that point, Nancy, she's just enamored with Nancy, but she's not enamored with Nancy in a way that necessarily replaces Myra.
She's a science experiment.
Right. She's the experiment. But once she has the experiment, she doesn't need Myra to help her with the science. At that point, she's disposable, and you could do a lot more. Also, on a different hand, you might have more of Myra really trying to sabotage Nancy.
Absolutely. You could have more jealousy. Oh, absolutely. They could be so great. Because just think of this. You could have Myra could have a boyfriend or something like that, and Nancy starts horning in on, and you could have drama where Myra says, haven't you taken enough from me? It seems like everything I do, you suddenly think is yours. I see how the professor is with you. You could have all this weird jealousy and psychosexual stuff going on. But
Nancy, doesn't want any of that. She certainly doesn't want to be a victim that turns into a Dracula.
No. And I love how they do. You mentioned a Dracula, because that's how they talk about it in this movie. They use this word "a Dracula" like it's a noun meaning a vampire, which is wild. I've never heard this in a movie before, where we've got Draculas,
and
that's just amazing.
It would be a Dracula, because they
yes.
I love all the dubs that somehow become a Dracula.
Yes.
For some reason, they add the R to it. It's such a I'm Dracula.
There's so many bits in this movie that would be great gifts. I think any of the business while Tab is doing his puppy love number, there's all kinds of good bits that would make gifts. Like the girls dancing with the couch cushions, I think is truly bizarre and just brings us to a totally different level.
Early Western equivalent of like the anime body pillow.
Yes.
I still want to know where these kids had all that. Again, like their choreography when the guy starts singing is very impressive, considering that they improv'd all of that.
Some crazy kids, the crazy kids of the 50s, Drew. We lost some along the way. We lost our way.
We lost our rhythm, apparently.
Yeah, that's what it is.
We lost our way. We no longer just break out when a hoppin' rock tune comes on.
I can only imagine that in this universe, from a very young age, they are trained and they said, listen, when somebody suddenly starts singing, there's some things that you can do. Like if there's two of you, one of you can get on either side and you can do this and a little bit of this, and people so they've been carrying it around with them since they were 8 years old, and they're just ready to do what appears to be completely made up on the spot choreography. It reminds
me of like when I used to watch old episodes of the not Mary Tyler Moore show, Dick Van Dyke show. Mm-hmm. And they would have parties and occasionally dance numbers would just break out.
Yes.
So you could get trained like Iron Fist or Daredevil at 8 years old, but instead you get trained to do, rock dance numbers.
Yes. Well, now, that's this universe
combo. If you have Iron Fist doing all this kind of stuff, that's the new series.
Yes.
Probably better than what we got with Danny Bland as well, but I don't know.
Again, you know what's funny is I don't think I ever saw a single episode of that show, which is really funny. But
I've never seen the Dick Van Dyke show.
No, Danny, the Iron Fist. Never watched.
Iron Fist.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely not going to jump on the bandwagon of hating it because I haven't seen.
Oh no, man! I mean, I like Power Man.
It's not as terrible as people made it out to be, but it's definitely not. Although I didn't watch the second season, and apparently the second season is much better.
But I just my witness. I had no idea there was a second season. Honestly,
yeah, I just like the idea that some people get trained to be like kung fu, superheroes, and other people get trained to do snappy dance numbers with pillows around a crew.
I would say snappy dance numbers are probably more useful in most cases than knowing super kung fu.
Absolutely,
but that's what I'm saying. Like they should combine it, and then you're an unstoppable force.
That does sound like you should write that. I love the rock and roll. I love the idea of a nonstop force of rock and roll dancers who also, can do kung fu and hunt, Draculas. By the way, okay, while they're at this party.
Nobody's done that I've seen a Temptations style band that's also a group of vampire hunters.
Oh my God, that would be so great. That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. Yeah. Because that'd be like the 60s, and you got these these 5 black performers in silk suits who can do all this choreographed simultaneous unison activity and hunt vampires. That sounds great.
Van Helsing's.
Yes, the Van Helsing's. Yeah.
Snappy suits and stakes.
If I ever return to writing anything with vampires and I put something in the past, that's just going to be a thing that I say exists. I'm just going to pretend that exists. Like that was the thing. Oh yeah, remember in the late 60s when there were these Motown vampire hunters? That was all the rage for a while. Every vampire hunter wanted to go to Motown. Yeah.
I want somebody like, the writers of Black Panther or like Felipe Smith or somebody. I don't know if Felipe's style is fit, but I want somebody who really would get into what Motown is.
Yes.
I have an idea, but
No, I agree with you. This is
a white dude, so I want.
It is perhaps not something I should be writing either. I agree with you on that.
But I love for somebody who really could just get into the meat of it.
Yeah.
And write the Temptations style group who kills vampires. That would be
Yes.
amazing. I would watch the hell out of that. Anyway,
Yes.
again, we're going into Lava Shark Productions
The
style
vampire
stuff.
hunteristics. The hunteristics. Yes. There we
Ooh,
go.
that's pretty good.
Yeah. Boom. Okay. So it's while that party's going on that Professor Branding is like, she's like writing in her notes and I guess brushing up her thesis, which all the men of the world are turning her down. Again, mad scientists always going, they called me mad. They ignored my ideas. And this is one though where they've got an in-unit. I mean, it's actually pretty great to say because they're sexist.
And
that's
totally
the best explanation
true
ever.
to the era.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, absolutely, you could see somebody, again, you look at a lot of these movies, a lot of people will write them off as lower budget, whatever. But when you look at what they're trying to get at,
yes,
it's still pretty remarkable because guarantee you, if this had taken off in a way that actually got some traction and there was somebody goes, hey, the vampire thing kind of worked out. Some guy would be, I've brought you Dracula's. Look here, everybody.
Yeah.
And she would not get the credit. At best, she would be a consultant. And the fact that they're really putting that out there where she goes, fine, you can create all the atom bombs you want.
Yeah.
I think it's going to blow you away and it's going to be mine. And, I'm going to start with women doing this thing.
Yes.
And, that's.
But the funny thing is, actually, if you read like Professor Twitter, a lot of that shit still goes on.
I again though, like the fact that was her motivation or at least part of her motivation, it wasn't all of it, in a movie from this time period is really interesting. I don't even doubt the filmmakers realized that was kind of progressive. I don't know if I want to give them credit for that. I think they probably were like, oh well, she probably should have stayed at home and made some macaroni instead of trying to get up with all this Dracula science.
The impression I get with 1950s exploitation filmmakers is that they are just moving like rockets and they just accidentally stumble into all kinds of great stuff because there's not, because they have to hit certain marks and the rest of it they're just filling in. And so, sure, whatever. They're like, I don't know, nuclear waste. That sounds good. So yeah, they hit on profound stuff, mainly just because their interests are not bound up in what the interests of a Hollywood movie are.
Well, I mean, the screenplay is by the same person who's writing on I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, I Was a Teenage Werewolf. So he's just cranking through, which again maybe why this is called Blood of Dracula. They're like, okay, the teenage thing, are we really going to do that third time? Or,
I guess that's it. I
57.
I think it is kind of formulaic in that it is very much like the other two movies. If you were to call this a trilogy, it is kind of, which it is. It is kind of a loose trilogy. These teenage monster movies. But the fact that you even said it yourself, Jason, the fact that they switch the gender switch on this, it gives it a lot more meat. I really did think this was the most interesting of the three.
Yeah, you said that.
Movies.
So I mean, what do you think? What elevates it? So you're at a house party and somebody goes, "I was a Teenage Werewolf," and you go, "No. What you got to check out? What you will enjoy more is Blood of Dracula." Why do you think this is a better movie? Like and I don't disagree with you. I think you're probably right. But I mean, what is it? Is it just that everything becomes more interesting when you have the slight riff of changing the gender, or what
I think the gender politics are part of it. I think the school setting is more fleshed out. And the character is sympathetic, and I Was a Teenage Werewolf, but I don't know. I just find this girl, how troubled she is from like the very first frame of this movie. I just find her very relatable in a way that the other two leads in these monster movies are not. And I Was a Teenage Werewolf was definitely a close second if we're going to stack the three of these. But this,
for sure,
I think definitely to a modern audience, this one has the most to say.
Yeah, for sure.
Whether by accident or by design, and I'm pretty sure it's by accident.
I think that's probably true.
Well, we were talking about when we were talking about Slumber Party Massacre last week, and the sort of deliberateness of that movie, that is a very deliberate movie. Like everything in that movie is definitely on purpose. I don't think that's the case here, but I don't think that makes it any less interesting at all.
Yeah.
I think that this movie is the sort of movie that I have a really good time discussing.
Yeah. No, I could watch this over and over again, because I just find looking at this world and look at them trying to put together a story, admittedly just to fill in, like they need a movie that's going to open in 3 months. And what they often wind up doing, it gives you a lot of angles on the culture at the time. So the party's happening. Professor Branding is working on a thesis and smoking cigarettes, and then she suddenly kind of becomes aware the party's happening, and so she turns her chair around. She gets out her Dracula amulet, and she just starts aiming it at the dorm. And this is hilarious. I mean, that. First of all,
but she's already hypnotized her. That's the key.
Oh, that's right. There was a hypnosis once. Yes, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
So and that's where we find out it came from, some Dracula adjacent area.
The Carpathian Mountains.
Right. Everything. They love saying the Carpathian Mountains in this movie.
Isn't that crazy? I love it. Yeah. No, I got this from the Carpathian Mountains, and Nancy's like, "Well, it's probably just an imitation." She's like, "No, it's not." It's suddenly she gets really pissy, like about her amulet. But later on, the cop is going to go, "I see you value your amulet very much because of the big chain you got it on." And she's like, "Yes, it is from the Carpathian Mountains." but
I love that he's all. It's just Well, I had this friend from the Carpathian Mountains. Who would have thunk it? Jeez, man.
That's the only place where the Draculas are.
Evidently. I mean, they're about to be. If she has her way, there'll be a lot more Draculas. Everybody can be a Dracula if you get this right.
It's truly bonkers. This notion
except Dracula, he probably would have to be somebody else.
Right.
Okay.
Well, they'll be equally
understand. The science here is confusing to me. She seems to
not just to you.
It seems to be that I'm gonna just pretend this is Marvel Comics and we can come up with an explanation.
Sure.
Right? It seems to be that her amulet has the capability of sending a signal that will give a post-hypnotic suggestion to Nancy that will turn her into a Dracula in the middle of this party, or at least will start that ticking. So that's what's going on. But why? I don't know. It seems to be she's just like, my experiments require me to turn you into a monster just to see, I guess, to see what happens, see how far it goes.
And it's the Jekyll and Hyde thing. It's her whole thesis.
Yeah.
She's going to unleash. This is the first person who has as much anger and rage.
Right. But that's nutty as a fruitcake, because this notion that she's going to do that and then people are going to die, and she's going to be like, well, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. So, I guess that's it.
But these eggs are going to be much more devastating than the atomic bomb.
There's, Nancy turns into the wolf girl and goes down and
the Dracula.
But the Dracula. She turns into the Dracula. She goes down and bites the girl who's like sitting up in the lab. So the cops come around and they're like, somebody bit this girl and drained all her blood. And now begins the part of the movie, again, not a very long movie, where we have a series of times when Nancy just turns into a Dracula, as they call it. And once she does it like twice in a row with a separation of like 45 seconds.
Double Dracula.
It's the Wolfman lap dissolve too, which I always love seeing.
Right.
So great. Oh my gosh. And by the way, I have to say, I have been admiring this Dracula outfit like for 30 years. I mean, it is so cool with the scarf and the skirt and the weird hair and the big teeth. I mean, it's a neat monster.
She's so, kind of like almost like a Nosferatu, but with hair.
Yeah.
And it's considering the time period, you would have thought they would have gone with sort of a Vavavoom-y, Draculina type character. And I'm kind of impressed that they didn't. Like
No, you're right.
they really made the episode, you know, for as much as this movie is about like girls in tight dresses like prancing around, you know, like they really when it came down to it, it was like, let's make her really scary, which is also again kind of progressive because women aren't really often allowed to be that. And you know, again, I don't think there was, I'm probably giving them too much credit once more, but I really think this is a cool monster design. Like I you know, I want a poster of this. I want, you know.
There is a poster, by the way. It's just $20 and it's 40 inches wide. I mean, that's so. I know I'm gonna order that really.
Would you have been more happy if they had done like a Vampira kind of character? Or do you think think that it's better they went this way?
Because that was already a thing that exists. I like that this is its own look. It's kind of cool because they could have been. You're right. They could have been completely exploitative and just grabbed a design that already existed. And
it could have been Mimi Van Doren in a dark wig.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And that's kind of what you got in the poster, where you have this weird, her crazy eyebrows and everything, but she's got a big dress on, you know, as opposed to the sort of regular 50s skirt that she's wearing here.
I am surprised. I don't think I've ever seen, either at a convention or at any gothy style club, I don't think I've ever seen someone dressed as this vampire.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Weird.
I think this is too deep a cut.
Well, that's
it's not that that's
because it's cool.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Like I think if this movie was, because I have seen, I was a teenage werewolf at horror conventions, but I think it's because that movie is the most famous of these, therefore it's the one that the most people have seen.
Right. The letter jacket and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that also got a second lease on life in the early 90s It miniseries. So there's a whole generation of people that know it from that. Like if this movie had like a stronger villain, it's not because the design isn't cool, because it is. Although again, the very thing that I'm praising about it, maybe that's the other reason why people don't want to dress up at it, because people do like to be sexy if they can.
Yeah, a little more vavavoom as possible. I don't know. I love it. I love this.
I think she's great. I wouldn't harm a hair on her eyebrow.
Yeah, here you go. Walmart, believe it or not, Walmart sells online a Blood of Dracula poster that is 27 by 40. That's a big ass poster. That's pretty good. So I'm definitely gonna get that. Julia's gonna be like, "Why are you spending money on this stuff?" And I'll be like, "Because."
They're like, well, if I have to explain it to you, it's because this poster is going to be bigger than the atomic bomb.
Yeah,
you better step in line because we're gonna. This is more dangerous than that. And I'm saying this as a man.
So she does have, you know, she goes on kind of a rampage while they're out on a so-called Halloween scavenger hunt. Nancy, who now is given to just sort of bloodlust, just like Jekyll and Hyde, turns into the Dracula. Bites.
Again, it's, you know, science gone wild, so you can't control it. That's the danger, is you're dealing with this stuff that you have no business messing with. Pardon me.
Yeah.
So she has no business messing with this because she doesn't know what the Carpathian Dracula gem's going to be or what it will unleash. And that, you know, again, back to Jekyll and Hyde, it mirrors that because she's turning into it more often and doesn't have as much control. But she's also going, hey, I don't think this is what you hypnotized me to make me feel better. I don't feel that anymore. Is this okay? Yeah. And you know, Brandon goes, no, it's fine. Keep I didn't say murder. Keep doing what you do. But I still think that the tragic part of, you know, Myra being tossed aside is still one of those things that's there's so much stuff there.
Yeah.
And I think most likely, I mean, a lot of these movies are just created to fill seats, and we forget about that. So we have a show where we dissect all this stuff. We're probably spending more time. You know, again, if you ask the writers or director, they might go, no, we just needed, it had to have these beats and we were going. Like we were just, like you said, just keep going, keep making things.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more to it, and you can hang a lot of stuff if you, again, like Drew's saying, make it a little bit longer.
Oh, absolutely.
But I don't know. I don't know if
I might be all in for an hour-and-a-half version of this.
Right. I mean, sometimes you don't need that. But, in discussing it, I think it has so many cool themes that even if you just picked one to kind of go in that direction and really flesh it out, it would be cool.
Well, even some of the stuff that I'm not as interested in, but like I still think there should have been more of, like her relationship with her boyfriend.
Oh, yeah.
He just shows up at the last, at the 15, when the movie's got 15 minutes before it ends.
Yes.
And he tells her this whole story about how the professor tried to get him to leave the school. Mm-hmm. That could have been a scene instead of like him telling it. That could have been a scene, and it probably should have, because one,
agreed,
he needed to be in the movie a little bit more instead of just this idea, because we've seen his picture, to make us actually care about her, being about to attack him. Mm-hmm. But also, I would have liked to have seen that sort of confrontation with the professor, because we never really and until the very end we don't see too many people push back at her, not like maybe not even the cops really, like no one's really suspicious of her, and I would have loved to have seen some more skepticism thrown her way.
Well, that's a really good point. You could have had somebody go, I don't know, there's something hinky, because now that sort of describes plenty of movies we've seen where at least one detective is suspicious of the professor or of whoever, or of Carrie, or so yeah. Well, there's I would actually, if this was a public domain movie, by the way, the cool thing is you could do a really neat exercise in just writing other scenes to fit into the movie, to just try to expand it. But you could also remake it, and you could remake it and just put it still in the 1950s, which would be wild. I mean, I think I would love to see this place. If you, chances are, if you remade it though, you would put it in 2020, and I have no idea what terrible things would befall us.
Also, it's interesting because the boyfriend starts out with kind of a genuine place of caring. Hey, I don't know what's going on here. It was weird. You didn't write me but once. But even he, like the men kind of suck in this movie.
Yeah.
And, as lots of guys do. But it kind of starts to change in, hey, I want to get you away because we have all these plans. I have all these plans, which isn't entirely selfish, but because they're just so either stereotypical or he's kind of wishy-washy.
Well, he's not interesting
in a
way. Her weird psychodrama with Professor Branding and Myra and all these girls, this world of women that she has entered, is way more interesting, and than this guy who has shown up to like take her back to what.
But they had more time to develop him, he could have been at least semi-interesting, because he is her link to a normal life.
Right.
Yes.
And as a movie, you mentioned Jekyll and Hyde.
Mm-hmm.
And even though this is a vampire movie, it's a very non-traditional vampire movie. In fact, it's probably actually something that we haven't even mentioned. One of the first movies to really use like a sci-fi explanation of sorts for why there is a vampire. So with that, and it's May, like having her have like a link back towards humanity helps her pathos. So I think he could have been developed, like maybe he wouldn't have been like the most interesting, probably not, but I think he could have been developed into being at least a little bit more multidimensional and therefore more useful in the movie. I don't know.
You just nailed something really interesting though, which is that if this is in a way much more informed by sci-fi like Jekyll and Hyde. Jekyll and Hyde, remember, he goes into the other world when he's Hyde, and he comes back and he hangs out with the boring regular people as Jekyll, and he sincerely wants to be Dr. Jekyll. That's the morality of that movie. And Hyde, we are never intended to think Hyde is all that great because we see Hyde to be twisted and awful. But in this one, she's in this world that is dominated by Professor Branding, and she is occasionally turning into Dracula and becoming dangerous.
Well,
but,
so Tony brought up Split, and there is, I don't want to go full on into that, but like there is a long-standing trope about bad, sort of gaslighty therapists.
Yes.
And this doctor, even though she's not technically a therapist, she does kind of function in that. And that is a holdover from, admittedly, that is very much a holdover from I Was a Teenage Werewolf. But,
just imagine if there had been one scene, Drew, where, just one, because it's a quick movie. Imagine just one scene where something good happened because the professor turned her into a Dracula. Like if, I don't know what it would be, like if she overcomes some fear of dogs or something. I mean, who knows? But something where it was cool to be a Dracula, and so she kind of got into it. And then, of course, she's also a murderer, and so then it's more complicated.
Well, if this is a longer, more ambitious movie, you could have done what the 30s Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde did, where you slowly have the vampire character becoming more and more monstrous and out of control. I don't think this movie obviously was ambitious that way. Right. I don't think that they wanted to talk about. I don't think they were thinking that strongly about psychology. I don't think that they were thinking that much about the human psyche. A lot of this sort of meat that we're finding into it, it's unintentional.
I suppose you're right. Yep.
But I would love to see a version of this that could have some of these concepts put into it. Like if somebody were to say, I'm remaking Blood of Dracula, I'd be like, that's a good idea because there's a lot of untapped potential in this story. And I guess the same could be said to be true of I Was a Teenage Werewolf, but I think, again, because it's a young woman, that just makes it so much more complex than like an angsty teenage boy, which is, again, super tropey. Like, I don't know. I really like a lot about what's going on in this movie. And just I think that kudos to the filmmakers for making something that was accidentally very interesting.
I would take that in a heartbeat. As an artist, I would love if I just backed into interestingness. I mean, that would be fabulous. Who among us would not want that? In fact, it's we should probably wrap up, but it breaks my heart that this is not a better remembered film. That's just mind-boggling to me. First of all, we said all the things, that Stephen King gave Michael Landon and his werewolf new life, sure. But it's heartbreaking that this is not remembered. So it goes. I mean, the fact is, the past.
I Was a Teenage Werewolf is also a better title. Like,
that grabs you.
Yeah. Blood of Dracula
is confusing. Yeah,
it's generic. Like there's a ton of vampire movies that are something or other of Dracula. Like you just mentioned Horror of Dracula. There is also House of Dracula. Son of Dracula. That's just
like
off the top
Dracula, Taste the Blood of Dracula.
Brides of Dracula. Like, so this movie kind of gets lost in that, even though it's not that.
Al Adamson made a movie called The Blood of Dracula's Castle, which, by the way, I think we need to cover someday because it is awesome and crazy.
What you need is that Al Adamson box set.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
Is that movie in there? I bet it is.
I have to double check. I got it, but I haven't gone all the way through the whole box set yet. So
had John Carradine in it. That movie did pretty cool.
Everybody's favorite bargain basement Dracula.
On Riff Tracks, they made the comment where they said John Carradine would just walk down the street and bad movies would just form around him. I just love
it. To be other ones like Diner of Dracula, Van of Dracula.
Listen. I want the Van of Dracula.
Has
that
Van of Dracula.
Oh my God,
Chrysler, LeBaron of Dracula.
But Yorga See, the thing is, Yorga doesn't drive the custom van. When I was in the 5th grade, I wrote the first like real prose I ever wrote, and I published a 2-part story in our school newspaper. How I managed to convince them to publish short fiction, I have no idea. But it was called The Owner, and it was Dracula, and he drove a black custom van. And to this day,
that thing better have had red shag carpeting inside it. Velvet lined makes more sense, but well, the part with the coffin would have to be velvet lined, and the rest could be red shag carpet.
God, how sweet would that be? How sweet would Dracula's custom van?
Plus, it would have the cup holders, but the cup holders would hold like goblets.
It'd have like an 8-track. What 8 tracks would Dracula have anyway?
All the best ones. That's for damn sure.
Lately, I've been getting into Ronnie Millsap.
Well, if it's your custom vampire van, it's Steely Dan. 8-track.
I don't think Dracula can drive in a van because all vans are inherently Van Helsing.
No. The rival van would be Van Helsing.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
This is a great 80s Saturday morning cartoon that we're formulating here, where it's like monsters that turn into trucks. It's like
I did have a treatment for van art that comes to life.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And fights each other.
That's a wonderful idea.
Like sci-fi versus Van
Mackerel. Van Mageddon. I love it. Oh, okay.
And nobody I better not see a Van Mageddon out there, because I know for a fact I have documentation on that.
Just start working on that now, man. Yeah, get it done in like 6 weeks. It could be a thing that exists.
I'm totally going to buy a van and put a mural of every actor that has played Van Helsing on it, just so I can have a Van Helsing now.
And the license plate also has to say Helsing.
Oh, yes. For sure.
Yeah,
I'm down with this.
The Owner, that was called. That 2-parter was called The Owner. Dracula came back. I can't even remember what his very clever plan was. Other than he had a boat in the harbor and he had a sweet custom van for getting back and forth from the harbor.
It better have been a houseboat. That's the only way.
See, the Dracula you're describing there is the Michael Nouri Dracula, that one where he's like a Mac Daddy professor at some community college. And
I mean, he's driving a custom van. He's got a boat. That boat's going to be a houseboat. And that houseboat is going to be full of exactly the parties we've been disparaging lately.
Oh my gosh!
Show up for some wine. Oh no, it's wine.
I mean,
it's rice,
oh my
Michael.
God, Tony, I want to see that now. Jesus Christ, I really want that to be a thing that exists. Okay.
Add it to the pile, man.
Yeah.
What the hell are we doing?
My goal, personally, I got to tell you, my goal between you and me is.
And now everybody who's listening. But
no, but this is hey, accountability. It actually is a good idea. I want to just start making really good use of my time, and no longer in the future, in the next 10 years, different from the last 10 years, I'm going to stop worrying so much about like what my agent can place. I really just want to write whatever the heck I want. And so it means basically writing a book out like every 3 months. Just write the next one that's interesting, write the next one.
Jason, it's
What's that?
called Vampire.
Oh, snap.
But surely that's got it. Like, there's no way that's not.
The road of the vampires. Yes.
There's vampires and manpire.
Van Manpire.
There's a show called Vampires.
I can't believe that's a thing that exists. So all right. I like the idea of placing.
But this is different.
1982. Yes. So, and by the way, if you haven't seen Michael Nouri as Dracula, I recommend that. I wonder if they have that on YouTube. Because I haven't seen it anywhere else. There was a TV version. It was called Cliffhangers. It was.
Oh man, I love that show.
Yeah. So anyway, back to Blood of Dracula. It ends with for reasons that escape me, Nancy and Professor Branding fight. Oh, because Nancy is overcome with grief and guilt, and she fights. And Professor Branding hasn't really thought this through very much, or it's just time to wrap up the movie because she gets out the amulet, which makes no sense at all. Nancy turns into a Dracula and like slaughters Professor Branding, but falls on a stick that impales her and she dies. And in the words of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you'd be surprised how many things that will kill. I mean, it doesn't matter that she's a vampire. She gets impaled through the chest, and so that's it.
Yeah, if she was even a normal person, of course that would kill you.
Yes.
Not that she was, because clearly there was something there going on.
I mean, again, it would have been great to have Professor Branding be a much more manipulative person and to take advantage of whatever insecurities and problems Nancy had. But as presented, Nancy's doesn't have any problems that are not stemming from just some grief and irritation at her father for being overly lusty. But she's basically, she's not that bad, this kid. So I don't know. But we don't get to see Professor Branding twist her into something that is worse. But whatever. And that's it. That's the end of the movie. And all of her notes are destroyed. I love that. That's
as they should be. She was playing with something that no one should. God's domain.
Right. Let's not have that stinger. Right. You all should know better, don't you, Dr. Doom? This
so delightful. I love it. I just love it.
God is more powerful than science, Jason.
Oh, it makes me sad because people are saying that for real.
Yeah, I know, right?
Like
the
you can. I try not to judge, and to me, your beliefs can be your own. Sure. But in the time that we are in now, that's anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just depressing. You can't tell me how viruses work.
Well, and in this movie, even though normally a horror film of this era, you would have somebody say they tempered in God's domain, I don't think anybody even uses that language in here. This is a much more naturalistic film. They do talk about
said something about it when they talk about the notes, but I could be wrong.
I mean, it definitely should fit there. I just don't remember the actual words involving like God's domain. You'd expect it, but fascinating. So that's Blood of Dracula, and also a brief digression into vampires. So I guess we should get our final thoughts, and I think we started with Tony, right? So okay, Tony, make some sense out of this. You can wrap all of this up for us. I hope.
I mean, I like the movie and I like it. Again, it's one of those where the more we discuss it, the more I go, man, this had some more stuff than even I was thinking about. That when I play it back, it's even cooler.
Yes.
Also, by the way, and I apologize if I get this wrong, and I should know better because my last name again is Salvaggio, and it sucks when people get it wrong. But the director, Abel Candle, was from Romania, so that could definitely stem from why everything's Carpathia Mountains.
Really?
And he wrote as this one is Ralph Thornton, and a bunch of others as Kenneth Langtree. But I was looking back through it. Kenneth Langtree, also, Candle here, wrote The Headless Ghost, which is one of my favorites as a kid.
What's The Headless Ghost?
Oh man, it's so groovy. It's 1959. You should check it out.
How can I not know this movie?
I saw it on like Monster Theater, and then every time I've seen it since then. I haven't seen it recently, so there's always a chance that young me was just like, "What? Why would you like that?" But
no, I'm
that's
ready.
That's definitely gonna be my endorsement. Now that I know he's also the writer, is The Headless Ghost. But it makes sense now. Like, hey, I'm from Romania, Carpathian Mountains. That sounds, that's Dracula that we know, and I know this. Let me just mention it in my screenplays. But I really and I think especially the world we live in and how things are changing and how I personally think they should change. I dig that digging up this movie where the main villain is a woman who goes, look, I've been passed by. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm sure a lot of women could relate.
Absolutely.
And I think we're really lucky there aren't more super villains who turn out this way, because certainly so many women in our lives have stories of just jerks and creeps.
Yeah.
So and in reality, like so many things that you find out was, hey, that this thing was discovered by a woman first, but because academia was this, we didn't know about that until now. What a piece of crap. That sucks. Hopefully we're moving in a direction where we find out more of that, and the actual people who women who made these things or invented things or discovered things or wrote papers, novels, etc. Important things get their due. But the film says a lot of stuff that, again, I think is really interesting in a drive-in movie kind of setting. There's always, again, the chance that we're thinking about it too much, but again, that's kind of why we're just hanging out and shooting the bull about these movies.
But I find it inspiring to think about this kind of thing, Tony, because we discover it teaches us to watch stuff for things that it sneaks up on you. You can find wisdom that you didn't know was there. But second, it inspires me to write more stuff, and to do better. So, but
I really enjoy it. Again, I hadn't seen it in a long time. I've only seen pieces of it, so this was my first time seeing it all the way through. It's a lean movie. It does have tons of the tropes of teenage things of what you need in a teenage movie of the time period. But yeah, I think it's got a lot of cool bits in it. Cool Dracula design. Again, I'm with Drew though. I think the cop part could be either fleshed out or cut, because it's mainly there just to have exposition and yet another person say Carpathian a lot.
Yeah.
Which I think tonight I've reached my quota of times I've said Carpathian, probably more than I ever have before.
I think that's absolutely, it's true for me as well. Thank you. Drew, what about you?
Well, first off, just for the hell of it, Carpathia. Secondly, I really enjoyed this movie. I'm probably gonna watch it a few more times in the near future because I think it was fun. I'm gonna try and get more people turned on to it because I think it's an interesting movie and it's an underserved. It deserves to be a bigger cult classic than it is. Like there's a lot of movies that you see a lot of fan art and costumes and things like that. This movie deserves to be rediscovered. In a way that like I remember years back that it seemed like Spider Baby was kind of having a resurgence in popularity.
That's a super good point.
I think this movie deserves a little bit more love thrown its way because it's a cool movie. I really enjoyed watching it, and if you haven't seen it, here's your chance. It's on Prime. We're all stuck at home, but more or less. It's only a little over an hour long. What do you got to lose?
Yeah, that's wonderful. I have nothing to add to that. Other than yes, what you said is absolutely correct, and I'm glad that I watched it. I have no endorsements actually for this week. I mean, we don't normally necessarily do them on the Hangout episodes, but if there's anything that you'd like, since people are going into a long weekend, if there's something that you'd like to mention that people should catch up on or watch during the weekend, let us know, especially because we're not going to have an episode on Sunday. So feel free. Tony, do you have anything for us?
No, other than the Headless Ghost. But man, now that I think about it, what I wish is, given the stuff we talked about, I wish that either Women in Caskets would cover this movie, or like Kayla Janice or Alexandra Heller Nicholas. I wish any of the women writers that I know would cover this. Now that maybe, maybe that's not an interest or whatever, but given kind of how I see the movie now, I would love for not dudes to look into this movie.
No, well said. Well said, because they'd see things that I know I don't necessarily pick up on.
Yeah, and I think that would be fascinating. I love hanging out with you guys and talking about this, but just we happen to know so many really good women writers. Whenever I hear that point of view in deep cut horror, that's where it's at.
It's super exciting. Yeah, I agree.
So, and that's what that's still what I'm hoping. I know there's a long road, but hanging out with Rain and like really discussing things, because we're at home. And especially
Mhm.
now in Texas where they're closing everything back down because nobody listened, which is like a horror movie. You know, you have the scientists going, "Don't do the thing," and then everyone's like, "Huh?" And guess what? Because our,
Yeah.
you know, especially in Texas, I don't know, but yeah. So you know, we've been discussing, you know, all manner of both politics and state of the world and everything like that. And one thing that I'm hoping that comes about a lot of sea change that looks like it's happening is that we get more voices. Again, you know, and some people get riled up when you talk about this as well, because I don't think there's anything wrong with the three of us discussing these movies and having a blast and being friends. But you know, we're who we are. It's three cis white guys.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping, it's my sincere hope, that we do get more. Like, now's the time to, you know, I'm hoping more people get to step up and get the opportunity. You know, I mean, plus by now, I mean, we're hundreds of episodes in, so we've been doing this a while. But especially at the beginning of, even before the beginning of this pandemic, there was the trope of like, "Hey, I have a podcast." And podcast guys, neckbeard podcast guys, right? Being a thing. Oh, did you know I have a podcast about craft beer or whatever? You know, so. But it's my sincere hope that I just in my head as we're talking back through it, that's the kind of stuff that I want to find out, different takes on deep cut movies.
Yeah,
is really what I would like to see more of. And if there is that, I don't listen to nearly as many podcasts as I should probably, but you know, that's, if you have those links or you do listen to this and go, "Hey, that's what I do, jerk, why haven't that's me," right?
yeah.
I didn't know, like, you know, post on our Facebook, you know, hit
Oh
us up
yeah,
on
we will
Twitter.
gladly. We would love to hear that. We will listen to it.
A,
And tweet
to
about
listen,
it. Yeah.
B, to amplify, C, because I think we all have, that's the richness of that tapestry is awesome. And it's why I hate gatekeepers, and it's why I can't stand, there's room for all of us. As long as you're not a creep or a jerk, I don't want you. But for
You know,
normal,
I'd love to hear the
great
Monster
people.
Movie Happy Hour do this show.
Oh
do this
yeah,
movie.
absolutely.
Because they're into monsters. So I mean, this
Right.
actually would probably be up their alley. And since they come from that direction, you know, and they're also co-ed, it would be cool to hear and they might pick up on themes that we miss. But yes,
I don't know. And I probably talked more about this. I'm sure there's somebody who's going to call me out and go, "Oh, look who's looking for wokeness points," or some crap like that. But that's fine. You can believe me if I'm genuine or not. But I really, that's the kind of stuff I've kind of like been searching for more often lately, because I just think that's where we should be searching.
Wunderbar. Drew, do you have anything to endorse?
Couple of things. So this week on Comixology, I got Bitter Root Volume 1 Family Business, put out by Image Comics. It is set during in Harlem during the 1920s. It's about an African American family of secret monster hunters.
Awesome.
But monsters in this universe are created from either hate or sorrow in your soul. It's just as much a family story as it is a monster hunting story, but both of those elements are really good. It's written by Chuck Brown and David F. Walker, and it's got beautiful. I cannot just some of the most gorgeous comic art I have seen in a long while by Sanford Green. Like, this is a really stylish book. Like the way, like all their weapons for fighting monsters are just I'm surprised that this has not been optioned as a TV show or movie yet already. It's such a ready for just the designs and everything. It's just such a well thought out universe, and I really enjoyed reading it. And I think a lot of our listeners, obviously, since it is a monster hunting book, I think that they would get something out of it. It's also got a slight element of steampunk, but I wouldn't call it steampunk. It's just sort of the aesthetic of the way the weaponry looks. It's got that sort of vibe to it, but I really just enjoyed the hell out of reading it.
What would you say is the age range on that? Like you said, it's a family book. Is it family you can give to kids in the family kind of appropriate?
No, it is decidedly more adult in nature. I would think teenagers would be okay with it, but
Gotcha.
I definitely wouldn't give it to like a little kid. Probably would scare them.
Right.
Of course, as I always say, my parents let me see all kinds of things when I was a kid, so your
Sure.
mileage may vary, but when I say family, I mean that it's like about the relationships in this family and
Right, and
how
that's what I like. I mean, when I heard that, that's why I ask, is because I always kind of dig that dynamic, and I think having that be something that's positive along with monster hunting, it ticks a lot of boxes, and so that's why I was curious. But that makes sense. Cool.
I do think you would like it, Tony. So the other thing that I am going to endorse is a YouTube channel called The Entropy System. For the last few weeks on social media, I've been talking a lot about how I am a person that lives with dissociative identity disorder, which of course always raises a lot of questions. And the problem with answering a question about a psychological condition is, even though there are overarching symptoms from person to person, it's also tailored to each person's psyche, because it's inherent to that. It's a psychological condition. But nonetheless, I get a lot of questions. Online, there is a like the start of like a community of people who are now starting to reach out and talk more openly about what it's like to live plurally, basically, and that you have dissociative parts of yourself, you have alters. The Entropy System is my favorite YouTube channel about this. It talks a lot about this woman's particular experience of living with DID. And I think it would answer a lot of questions that people have for me. Although I will state from the get-go that my dissociative system is extremely different from hers. But there are commonalities from within everybody, and I think for those of you who have questions, this is a fun channel. It's not a downbeat channel. It's very upbeat. This is the same woman that actually founded System Pride Day and that sort of thing, and actually helped foster an online community. And I think that her channel's cool and it deserves more people to look at it. And she does pop culture-y things, like she did a review of It Part 2. She, did some discussions about the movie Split, which we were talking about earlier, and its sequel Glass. She talks about The Flash. I just watched a video the day where she talks about The Flash and, the Caitlin Snow character on that. So there is a lot of pop culture plugins because she is a comic book and anime fan. And, I think that would help. But, I'm for people getting answers to their questions, but it's also always kind of difficult, because there's stuff when you're talking about your personal, mental health, there's always stuff that you don't necessarily feel comfortable sharing. And there's definitely stuff that is not shared on this channel, but she does share a lot, and bless her for that. And she's deserving of your views. If you are curious about this condition, because you've heard me talk about it on the podcast or on my Facebook group or on Twitter, here's a way to get some of those answers. Of course, I am not unwilling to answer questions, but I am also think that getting somebody else's perspective, particularly as Tony was pointing out, a woman's perspective, is also important. So my two things: you should go read Bitter Root, and you should watch The Entropy System on YouTube.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Drew.
You're welcome.
And that brings us to the end of our episode. If you enjoyed listening to us tonight, please find us on Facebook and engage us in talking about this movie, Blood of Dracula, and if any other podcasts are covering it. And join us on Twitter. All of us are on there. Trojan Lock is Tony. Halloween Man is Drew. I'm Jason D. Henderson. There's also a Twitter feed for the show, although we don't use it nearly as much. But we're around. So I would love to talk about this one more. And we'll definitely look for more like lost gems like this, because it really makes me happy to talk about them. All right, guys. Have a fantastic 4th of July. Everybody stay safe. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Good night.
Night.
Bye.